Betrayed by blood. I used to believe that family meant safety, that the people who raised you, who tucked you in at night, who kissed your scraped knees, who promised you the world, would never hurt you. I believed that until the day I found out the truth. Until the day I realized that trusting them was the biggest mistake of my life. The bank visit that changed everything. The air inside the bank was cold, the kind of chill that seeped into your bones no matter how many layers you wore. I sat across from the bank manager, my fingers nervously tapping against the smooth surface of the desk. I was here for one simple thing, to check on my college fund. The money my parents had told me was safe. The money they had promised was mine. The manager's eyes flickered with something I couldn't quite place. Pity? I shifted uncomfortably. Something felt wrong. She cleared her throat. "I'm sorry, Miss Carter," she said softly. I blinked. "Sorry for what?" She hesitated. "The account, it's been emptied." A stolen future. A sharp ringing filled my ears. "What?" I whispered, my throat tightening. "It was withdrawn, almost 2 years ago," she continued carefully. 2 years. 2 years ago. I tried to process the words, but they felt like a foreign language. That money was supposed to be untouched until I went to college. That money was supposed to be my future. My chest felt tight, my breath uneven. "Who withdrew it?" She slid a piece of paper across the desk. The names printed on it made my stomach turn. My parents. The confrontation. I don't remember leaving the bank. I don't remember driving home. All I remember is the rage. It burned inside me, hotter than anything I'd ever felt. When I stormed into my parents' house, my mother was sitting at the kitchen table, sipping coffee like she hadn't just ripped my future away. My father stood by the window, his arms crossed, looking bored. "You took my money?" My voice shook with anger. They exchanged a glance, like they had prepared for this moment, like they had already decided that my anger didn't matter. "We needed it," my mother said, setting her cup down. "Needed it?" I echoed, my hands trembling. "For what?" "For your sister," my father said, finally looking at me. I froze. "Ella?" "She was struggling," my mother added, like that excused everything. My sister had just bought a house. She had just gone on vacation. She wasn't struggling. She was living her best life with my money. "You've always had it easy," my father added, his voice turning cold. "This was our way of making things fair." I felt like the air had been sucked out of my lungs. All my life, I had done everything right. Straight A's. Never asked for anything. Followed the rules. And now I was being punished for it. A daughter's worth. "You said that money was mine," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. My mother sighed, waving a hand. "Stop acting like a victim, Clara. You'll figure something out." "Figure something out?" I laughed, but it wasn't out of amusement. It was out of pure, unfiltered disbelief. "You stole from me," I said slowly, the weight of those words finally settling. "You lied to me." My father shrugged. "Welcome to the real world. Not everything revolves around you." That was the moment something inside me snapped. I had spent my entire life trying to make them proud, trying to be the good daughter, but it had never been enough. And now? I was done. The plan begins. I left the house with my heart pounding. Tears burned my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. They thought they had won, that I would just accept it, that I would move on like nothing happened. They had no idea who they were dealing with. Because if they thought they could steal from me and get away with it, they were about to learn just how wrong they were. A lifetime of lies. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every memory I had of my childhood felt twisted. I thought back to every birthday. Ella always got the big gifts, the new phone, the expensive clothes, the lavish trips. And me? I got apologies. "Oh, Clara, we'll make it up to you next year." Next year never came. And now it all made sense. I wasn't their favorite. I was their backup plan, their afterthought, the one they expected to be strong enough to handle anything. But they had underestimated me, facing my sister. The next day, I showed up at Ella's new house. She opened the door with a smug smile. "Oh, let me guess," she said, crossing her arms. "You're here to complain about Mom and Dad's decision?" I stared at her. She was completely unbothered, like my suffering was just an inconvenience to her. "You stole my money," I said, my voice steady. She laughed. "Clara, don't be dramatic. It was just sitting there wasted on you." I saw red, but I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I just smiled. "Okay," I said simply. Ella raised an eyebrow. Okay, I nodded. Enjoy it while you can, sis. She frowned, and that's when she should have realized. The game had just changed, and I was no longer playing nice. The fire inside me. I walked away from that conversation a different person. I had spent too long being the good girl, the one who let things go, the one who never fought back. But this wasn't something I could forgive. They had taken everything from me. Now, it was my turn. They thought they had stolen my future. They thought I would stay quiet. But they were about to learn that I wasn't just going to fight back. I was going to win. A sister's betrayal. I stood outside my sister's house, gripping my phone so tightly my knuckles turned white. I shouldn't have been here. I shouldn't have given her the chance to explain. But some part of me, some desperate, naive part, wanted to believe there was a reason for what she did. A reason why she thought it was okay to steal from me. A reason why my parents had chosen her over me. I took a deep breath, squared my shoulders, and knocked, the smirk that sealed it. Ella opened the door with a smug smile. She leaned against the frame, arms crossed like she had been expecting me. Well, look who finally decided to show up, she said, tilting her head. Something inside me coiled tight, like she had already won, like this was just a game to her. I clenched my jaw. We need to talk. She sighed dramatically, stepping aside. Fine, but make it quick, I have plans. Of course she did. A house built on stolen dreams. I stepped inside, my stomach twisting. The place was nice, too nice. Brand new furniture, stainless steel appliances, a designer bag casually tossed on the counter. All of it, paid for with my money. She plopped down on the couch, picking up a glass of wine. All right, she said, taking a sip. Let's hear it. I stared at her, at the woman who used to be my best friend, at the sister who had once braided my hair when I was scared of the dark. Why? I asked, my voice quiet, controlled. Her eyes flickered with something, annoyance maybe. Why what? She said, shrugging. It was just money, Clara. You were sitting on it, doing nothing. I actually needed it. I let out a hollow laugh. You needed it? She nodded. Yeah. You were always the smart one, the independent one. Mom and Dad knew you'd be fine. Her voice was so casual, so effortless, like she hadn't destroyed me. Like she truly believed I didn't deserve it. My stomach twisted. That money was for my future, I said slowly, forcing the words past the lump in my throat. Ella rolled her eyes. Oh, come on, Clara. You act like you're homeless. You'll figure something out. You always do. She smiled, sipping her wine. But me? I deserved this. A knife in the back. Her words slammed into me like a punch. She deserved it? How many times had I stayed up late studying while she went out? How many part-time jobs had I worked while she bounced from failure to failure? How many times had I heard my parents say, Clara can take care of herself. Ella needs our help. I gritted my teeth. Tell me something, I said, voice sharp. If it was the other way around, if I had stolen from you, would you be okay with it? Her smile faltered, just for a second, but then she laughed, tossing her hair over her shoulder. That's different, she said. You don't understand, I've struggled. I felt numb. Struggled? I echoed. You mean like when Mom and Dad paid for your rent? Or when they covered your car payments? Or when they bailed you out after you crashed their credit card? She flinched. But still she shrugged. Look, it's done, she said simply. You can either get over it or waste your time being bitter. I inhaled sharply. You don't feel guilty at all, do you? Ella grinned. Not even a little. The final blow, I should have left right then. I should have walked away. But I couldn't move. Because I wasn't just looking at my sister. I was looking at every lie I'd ever believed. That we were equals. That we were family. That she would never, ever do this to me. But she had. And she wasn't even sorry. A sharp laugh bubbled in my throat. You know what, Ella? I said, stepping back. Her eyebrows lifted. I shook my head. I actually feel sorry for you. She frowned. Sorry? For what? I smiled, a cold, unfamiliar kind of smile. For thinking that money can buy happiness. For thinking that our parents will always protect you. For thinking that I'm just going to walk away from this. For the first time, she hesitated. What are you saying? I turned, walking toward the door. I'm saying, I said over my shoulder, enjoy it while it lasts. And then I walked out. Because this wasn't over. Not even close. The days after I couldn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her smirking face, her mocking voice calling me selfish for wanting what was mine. By morning, my anger had settled into something worse, something dangerous. Determination. They thought I was just going to accept this, that I would cry for a few days, then move on. But they had made a mistake, because if they thought I was the same Clara they could walk all over, they were about to find out just how wrong they were. A new perspective. That afternoon, I met with my Uncle James. He was the only one in the family who had ever seen me, who had actually listened. As soon as I sat down, he frowned. "You look like hell." I laughed bitterly. "That obvious?" He sighed, setting down his coffee. "Talk to me, kid." So I did. I told him everything. The money, the betrayal, Ella's cruelty. By the end, his hands were clenched into fists. "They did this to you?" he asked, a voice low, furious. I nodded. He exhaled sharply. "Listen to me, Clara," he said, leaning forward. "You don't owe them your silence." I swallowed hard. "What do you mean?" He met my gaze, steady and unflinching. "I mean," he said, "it's time they learned what happens when you push the wrong person too far. No more waiting." I walked out of that conversation with a plan. For the first time in days, I felt clear-headed. I wasn't going to argue with them. I wasn't going to beg for what was mine. I was going to take it back. They thought they had won. They had no idea what was coming next. The turning point. It had been 3 days since I confronted Ella. 3 days since she laughed in my face. 3 days since I realized my family never saw me as one of them. They thought I would just accept it. That I would go back to being the obedient daughter, the one who never caused trouble, who always kept quiet. But something had changed inside me. I wasn't going to let this go. I was going to make them regret ever thinking they could betray me and get away with it. Gathering the pieces. I sat at my desk, laptop open, eyes scanning every bank transaction from the last 2 years. Each withdrawal was like a slap to the face. $5,000 here, $8,000 there. Slow, steady theft. My parents had been draining my college fund for years, just under the radar, making sure I wouldn't notice until it was too late. I took screenshots, saving each one into a folder titled Proof. I wasn't going to argue with them anymore. I was going to bury them in evidence. The unexpected ally. I didn't expect to get a call from Uncle James, not after what happened at Ella's house. But when his name flashed across my screen, something told me to pick up. "Clara," he said, his voice heavy. "Hey, Uncle James." A long silence. Then, I heard what happened. I closed my eyes. Of course he did. Nothing in our family ever stayed a secret for long. "Yeah," I said, swallowing hard. "Guess you heard they took everything." He sighed. "I did. And I also heard Ella isn't exactly remorseful." I laughed bitterly. "That's an understatement." He hesitated, then spoke carefully. "Clara, I need you to listen to me. You have options." I frowned. "Options?" "Yes, legal options." I froze. "James, are you saying I can take legal action against them?" "Not just saying," he said. "I'm offering to help." The plan begins. I met Uncle James at his office the next day. He was a lawyer, a damn good one. He sat across from me, sliding a file toward my hands. "You have a case," he said simply. I stared at the papers. "This is real?" I whispered. "Very real," he confirmed. "They forged your signature, took money that wasn't theirs, and used it to benefit someone else." I exhaled slowly, my mind racing. "What happens if I move forward with this?" James leaned back, studying me. "Are you asking if they'll go to jail?" I nodded. He sighed. "Not necessarily. But they'll be forced to pay back every cent, and if they refuse, then yeah, legal consequences are inevitable." I swallowed hard. This was it. The moment I chose myself. I picked up a pen, my grip tightening, and then with a deep breath I signed the papers. The first shockwave. The legal notice arrived at my parents' house 2 days later. I didn't hear from them. Not at first. But Ella, she lost it. She called me 7 times in an hour. I didn't pick up. Then came the texts. "Ella, what did you do?" "Ella, you're seriously taking legal action?" "You're actually crazy. Mom and Dad are freaking out. You need to fix this." "Fix this?" I smiled, shaking my head. They weren't sorry. They were scared. And that was exactly what I wanted. Their desperation. That evening, my father finally called. I let the phone ring 3 times before answering. "Clara," he started, his voice tight, controlled. "Dad," I said calmly, "what the hell is this?" I leaned back against my couch, staring at the ceiling. "You stole my money," I said simply. "You left me with nothing, so now I'm taking it back." A sharp exhale. "We're family," he snapped. I laughed. "Oh, now we're family?" "Clara, listen. You're being dramatic. You don't actually want to do this. I tilted my head. You sure about that? Another pause. You're making a mistake, he said, voice low. No, Dad, I said, my tone steady, certain. You did. And then I hung up. The fallout begins. By the next morning, the news had spread. Our relatives knew. Friends, neighbors, people who had admired my parents now saw them for what they were. And my mother? She was humiliated. She showed up at my apartment, knocking frantically. I opened the door, arms crossed. Clara, honey, she started, her voice fake sweet. I didn't buy it for a second. Let's talk. I let out a slow breath. Are you here to apologize? She hesitated. Well, I just think this has gotten out of hand. I smirked. There it is, she frowned. There what is? The part where you tried to manipulate me into feeling guilty. Her lips pressed into a thin line. This will destroy our family, she whispered. I lifted an eyebrow. You already did that, I said simply. And then, just like before, I shut the door in her face. The taste of freedom. For the first time in my life, I felt free. No more guilt. No more chasing approval from people who never deserved my love. I had chosen myself, and I didn't regret it. Not one bit. But for my parents and Ella, the nightmare was just beginning. The breaking point. The morning after I shut the door in my mother's face, I woke up feeling lighter. No guilt. No second guessing. For the first time I had done what was right for me. But I knew better than to think my family would just accept it. They weren't the kind to admit defeat. No, they were the kind to fight back. And by afternoon, the war had officially begun. The call that changed everything. I was at work when my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I hesitated before answering. Hello? A pause. Then, you really think you're going to get away with this? Ella. Her voice was dripping with rage. I sighed. Hide. Hello to you too, Ella. Cut the crap, she snapped. Do you have any idea what you've done? I leaned back in my chair. I'm guessing you're not calling to apologize. Apologize? She scoffed. Clara, you're literally ruining our family. Do you understand that? Mom and Dad are freaking out. They might lose the house. I smirked. They should have thought about that before they stole from me. She let out a sharp laugh. You're so selfish. You don't care about anyone but yourself. I felt calm, colder than I had ever been. No, Ella, I said. I just finally care about myself more than I care about you. Silence, and then, you'll regret this, she hissed. And the line went dead. A storm is coming. By that evening, my phone was blowing up. Texts, calls, aunts, uncles, even some old family friends. They were all saying the same thing. This is a family matter. You don't need to take legal action. Think about your parents. Think about Ella. Not one person told me to think about myself. And that made my decision even easier. I put my phone on silent and ignored them all. They could panic all they wanted. I was done playing their game, the last attempt. 2 days later, my father showed up. At my door, unannounced. I opened it slowly, meeting his furious eyes. Clara, he said, voice tight, we need to talk. I crossed my arms. I don't think we do. He exhaled sharply. Enough of this nonsense. You're being ridiculous. You want the money back? Fine. We'll figure something out. But you need to drop this lawsuit. I tilted my head. Let me get this straight, I said. You stole from me, lied to me, used me, and now that you're facing the consequences, you want to negotiate? His jaw clenched. It was never about hurting you, he said. It was about helping Ella. She needed it more than you did. I laughed. Actually laughed. Wow, I said. You still don't get it, do you? Clara. No, I snapped, my voice sharp. You don't get to stand here and act like this is my fault. You made your choice. You picked her over me, and now you have to live with it. His face darkened. You're making a mistake. I smiled. No, Dad. I'm finally making the right choice. And then, like my mother before him, I shut the door in his face. The consequences hit hard. The next week was chaos. The lawsuit moved forward. And my parents? They were about to lose everything. Their accounts were frozen. Their assets were investigated. For the first time in their entire lives, they couldn't just talk their way out of a mess. And Ella? Her perfect little world was shattering. The house she bought? It wasn't hers. It was tied to the stolen money. And now it was gone. Desperation looks ugly on them. The final straw came a few days later. I got a text from Ella. Ella, can we talk? I stared at my screen. Then slowly I typed back. Why? Her response was almost immediate. Please, I just need to explain. Against my better judgment, I agreed. Because a part of me, no matter how much I hated it, still wanted to know if she could be saved. The last conversation. We met at a small coffee shop. She looked different, disheveled, nervous, like someone who had finally realized she wasn't untouchable. She sat down, clasping her hands together. Clara, listen, I never wanted this to happen, I raised an eyebrow. Then why did you do it? She swallowed. I thought Mom and Dad would fix it. That it wouldn't matter. I let out a bitter laugh. Wow, so you thought I wouldn't fight back? She flinched. Clara, I'm sorry, okay? I really am. But this lawsuit, you're destroying everything. I stared at her. Good. Her eyes widened. What? I leaned forward. You deserve to lose everything. Just like you made me lose everything. She sucked in a breath, shaking her head. But we're family. No, Ella, I said, my voice calm, final. We stopped being family the second you took from me and laughed about it. Her lip trembled. You hate me. I tilted my head. No, I said. I just don't care about you anymore. The words hit her like a slap. And for the first time since this all started, I saw it. Fear. Not fear of losing money, not fear of losing status, fear of losing me. But it was too late. I stood up, throwing a few dollars on the table. Good luck, Ella, I said, turning to leave. She didn't try to stop me. Because she knew. This time I wasn't coming back. The aftermath, Ella didn't call again. Not that I expected her to. After our conversation at the coffee shop, I think she finally understood. She had lost me. Not temporarily. Not in a way that could be fixed with a half-hearted apology, but permanently. And for someone like Ella, someone who had always assumed I'd be there no matter what, that was the worst punishment of all. Watching it all fall apart, 2 weeks passed. And my parents? They were drowning. The lawsuit had gone through. The bank had frozen their remaining accounts. And then came the IRS audit. Because apparently, when you steal a large sum of money and forge financial documents, it raises red flags. Their once perfect life was crumbling. I heard from a mutual family friend that my father had lost his job. Not because of the lawsuit, but because his company found out about it. And in his industry, financial fraud wasn't something you could come back from. The desperate plea then, one evening my phone buzzed. A number I hadn't seen in months. My mother. I let it ring. Then curiosity got the best of me. I picked up. Clara, she said, voice shaky, unfamiliar. I leaned back on my couch. Mom, I said flatly. A pause. Then, can we talk? I exhaled slowly. You sure about that? I asked. Last time we talked, you told me to grow up and accept reality. A long silence. Then, I know, she whispered. I was wrong. For a moment, I almost felt something. Almost. But then I remembered. I remembered how she dismissed me, how she made excuses for Ella, how she looked me in the eyes and told me I didn't deserve what was mine. So I stayed silent. Clara, she tried again. Your father and I, we're losing everything. The house, the savings, it's all gone. I waited. I knew what was coming. And? She let out a breath. We need help. There it was. Not a real apology. Not a moment of reflection. Just another attempt to use me. I smiled. Good luck with that, I said. Then I hung up. Ella's last shot. A few days later I got an email from Ella. Subject, I don't know what to do. I hesitated before opening it. Then curiosity won again. Clara, I know I don't deserve to ask for anything from you. I know I messed up, but I don't know what to do. The bank took back the house. I had to move into some tiny apartment, and I can barely afford rent. Mom and Dad keep calling, but I don't have anything to give them either. You don't have to forgive me. But please, can we just talk? I miss my sister. I stared at the screen for a long time. Maybe before, maybe in another life, I would have caved. But now? I finally understood. She didn't miss me. She missed what I used to give her, and I wasn't going to be that person anymore. I deleted the email. No response. No explanation. Just silence. Turning the page, months passed, and slowly my life became mine again. The money that was stolen from me, it was being repaid. Slowly but surely. I had moved into a new apartment, one I earned on my own. And my job, I was finally getting recognized for my work. Without the weight of my family's expectations dragging me down, I was actually thriving. And it felt good. The final goodbye. One day, while out shopping, I spotted someone familiar. My father. He looked different, thinner, older. We locked eyes for half a second. And then he looked away. I don't know if it was shame or pride, or if he simply didn't care anymore. But either way, I walked past him. Without a word. Without hesitation. Because I finally understood something I should have realized a long time ago. I was never part of their family. Not in the way I had always hoped. And that was okay, because I had built a new one. One that didn't demand or take or use me until I was empty. One that was real. And for the first time in my life, I was free. Moving on. Moving up. It had been almost a year since I last spoke to my parents. A year since Ella had tried to worm her way back into my life. A year since I had chosen myself over them. And in that time, I had rebuilt everything they tried to take from me. My finances were stable, my career was growing, and for the first time in my life, I felt free. But life has a funny way of bringing things full circle. Because just when I thought I had finally closed that chapter, the universe decided to throw one last test my way. A familiar name, an unexpected call. I was at work when I got the email, a subject line I never expected to see. From Ella, subject, please read. I sighed, debating whether I should even open it. Then curiosity won. Clara, I know you probably don't want to hear from me. I get it, but I need you to know something. Mom is sick. It's bad. I'm not asking you for anything. I just thought you should know. For a long moment, I just stared at the screen. Then I closed my laptop. I didn't reply. I didn't feel anything. No guilt, no sadness, just nothing. And that told me everything I needed to know. The old life, the new me. That night, I sat on my balcony, sipping a glass of wine, thinking about what could have been. There was a time when I would have dropped everything to run back, to be the daughter they always assumed would forgive, forget, and fall back in line. But that girl was gone. She had been replaced by someone stronger. Someone who finally understood that family isn't about blood. It's about who chooses you. And they had never chosen me, so why should I choose them? Closure. Looks different for everyone. A few weeks later, I heard from a distant cousin. Your mom's condition is getting worse, they said. I nodded, but didn't respond. I wasn't heartless. I just wasn't their safety net anymore. And the truth was, they had made their choices. So now, I was making mine. The last encounter. One day, while grabbing coffee, I saw her. Ella. She looked tired, worn down, like the weight of everything she had done was finally catching up to her. For a second, our eyes met, and in that moment, I knew she wanted me to say something. Anything. But I didn't. Instead, I turned around, paid for my drink, and walked away. No words. No confrontation. No final speech. Because she wasn't worth it anymore. Living well as the best revenge months passed. In my life, it only got better. I got promoted. I moved into a bigger apartment. I built friendships that were genuine, real, unconditional. I no longer checked my phone expecting a call from them. I no longer felt the urge to prove my worth to people who never valued me. And that was the real victory. Not the money, not the lawsuit, not watching their lives crumble, but knowing I had walked away without looking back. And knowing they would spend the rest of their lives realizing they lost me forever. And that was a loss they would never recover from.